All right, good afternoon, everybody. So today we're going to be looking at Seamus Heaney's poem Storm on the Island. As usual, I'm going to be taking you through the different methods that the poet uses within this poem and how he uses those methods to communicate his ideas. As with the poems that you will have looked at recently, Wilfred Owen's Exposure and Wordsworth, the extract from Wordsworth's The Prelude, Heaney's poem Storm on the Island deals with the relationship between man and nature. Specifically, it deals with the great power that nature holds and how that is brought into conflict with man. So, to begin with, our kind of overarching idea, the key idea for this poem then. Heaney uses this poem I've written to explore the power of the natural world and the comparative vulnerability of man. So by contrast to nature, man is vulnerable, humanity is weak in comparison to the overarching power of nature. So, a couple of AO2 points just to bring out at the very beginning of this poem, which you're going to notice straight away. This poem is a dramatic monologue. It's told from the perspective of an islander living on this kind of bleak, barren island landscape, which is being battered by this incredibly overpowering storm. The poem is also written in blank verse, and that means something really specific. Blank verse is unrhymed iambic pentameter. And you might be familiar with this form from your reading of Shakespeare. Shakespeare frequently makes use of iambic pentameter, frequently makes use of blank verse. So in iambic pentameter, you will see that each line contains 10 syllables, 5 pairs of syllables together. And this gives this sort of rhythmic rise and fall to the lines. It creates a really beautiful flow to this poem. And it makes it sound conversational as well. It makes it sound like the natural rhythms, the natural cadence of human speech. So we begin then. We are prepared, we build our houses squat. So immediately with the use of that word we get the sense of this community, that this is a collective of people living on this island. We are prepared, we build our houses squat. So this gives us the impression of a house that is not tall, that's low, that's flat, that's close to the ground. So as if the houses that this island community build are all quite low so that they're protected, as though they're hunched down against the weather. So the houses are built low to the ground. And we start to see why when we learn of this tremendously powerful wind that batters the island. So the houses are built low to the ground. Sink walls in rock and roof them with good slate. So these are the protective measures that the people of the island take against the almighty power of the storm. So we get the sense that this isn't a rare occasion, this kind of spell of bad weather. This isn't something that just comes up every now and again. This is a constant force and a constant presence in these people's lives. We are prepared, we build our houses squat, sink walls in rock and roof them with good slate. This wizened earth has never troubled us with hay, so, as you see, there are no stacks or stooks that can be lost. And then we have this caesura in the middle of the line, bringing that next idea to a close. So again, this isn't a poem where the ideas are sort of forced to exist within the confines of a particular rhyme scheme. The pauses fall quite naturally, sometimes in the middle of lines, as if this thought has just come to an end. So this wizened earth, and this really gives us the impression that this island is sort of dry, it's shriveled, it's wrinkled with age, it hasn't got a lot to offer. And you can see as well that it's not described as particularly fertile land. It's never troubled us with hay. This also gives us the impression of the persona's personality a little bit. We might think that an island with fertile land that grows things would be beneficial, but there's this kind of ironic, almost sarcastic tone here. This island has never given them anything, has never given them crops that they have to deal with. So we get the impression straight away that this island is barren, is perhaps inhospitable. And doesn't offer any potential for growth. This isn't a sort of gorgeous Wordsworthian paradise. This isn't land that's described in sort of beautiful tones. It's really quite grim, quite barren, quite bleak. So far the natural world isn't being presented as particularly welcoming. So this wizened earth has never troubled us with hay. So, as you see, and here's one of those little phrases that just creates that conversational tone, as if we are being spoken to directly. There are no stacks or stooks that can be lost. So stacks and stooks, these are ways of gathering crops, ways of gathering hay. So there is nothing there that could be lost. And it's interesting that Heaney uses this word lost as if to describe, the sort of the risk that this storm might pose to the island. He's saying, well, if we had crops, we'd be troubled by the wind potentially damaging them or blowing them away. But that's not the case. There's nothing there that can fall victim or fall prey to this storm. He goes on, nor are there trees which might prove company when it blows full blast. Now, this is interesting here. He personifies the trees, saying they might prove company. So there's nothing, when the wind blows, the trees aren't there as company. There's nothing sort of protecting them. There's nothing to shield the houses from this onslaught. So there are no stacks or stooks that can be lost, nor are there trees. This island is defined by the things that it lacks. It doesn't have stacks, it doesn't have stooks, it doesn't have trees. So it's defined by what it lacks, what it doesn't have. And then here we have this personification, no trees which might prove company. So no trees as protection against this storm when it blows full blast. Now, what I really like here, we have the use of the full stops at the end of the line, we have the use of caesura within the line, but Heaney is also a master of using this enjambement, and he particularly decides where he wants these lines to kind of overflow into the next. Here, when it blows full, it feels quite natural for the word blast to follow, but by putting it on its own line here, it really draws attention to the power of that word when it blows full blast. So we have this sense of emphasis created by that enjambement. So it puts the stress on that next word. And then again, we have this slightly conversational, you know what I mean, as if again we're being spoken to directly. You know what I mean. And he goes on, leaves and branches can raise a tragic chorus in a gale. So again we have this use of personification. Here, the leaves and branches are being turned into a choir. And we get the impression of the wind blowing through the trees and this persona listening to the sound of the wind in the trees. Nor are there trees which might prove company when it blows full blast. You know what I mean? Leaves and branches can raise a tragic chorus in a gale. So he's speaking about the sound of the wind moving through the trees, moving through the leaves, and we can imagine that sound so clearly. And he describes it like a tragic chorus, so it's a melancholy sound. Again, there's no sense of comfort or solace provided here, but there is now this little hint of beauty. The sound of the wind in the trees is slightly beautiful. It sounds like a chorus, albeit a tragic one. But there are no trees on this island, so we're not even given that beauty. We're not given that sound. This is just being presented as yet another thing that the island lacks. So can raise a tragic chorus in a gale. So the gale being this strong wind again. So there is a sense of beauty in this tragic sound. But this is something the island lacks. So we're really getting this sense of a very barren, very inhospitable landscape. It doesn't have a lot to recommend it. It doesn't have a lot of warmth. There are no trees to prove company. There are no leaves and branches to provide this tragic chorus. And now Heaney explains why that sound might really be quite welcome. So that you can listen to the thing you fear, forgetting that it pummels your house too. The thing that you fear, this attacking force, is this violent wind. So you can listen to the thing you fear. So listening to the sound of the wind moving through the leaves, moving through the trees, is a pleasant sound. It's distracting, and it enables you to forget that this thing creating this beautiful sound is pummeling your house. So if there were leaves, if there were trees, you'd be able to listen to that sound and ignore the fact that this storm is lashing down on your home. So you can listen to the thing you fear, the wind, forgetting that it pummels your house too. And look at that fantastic verb there, giving that sense of violence and aggression. Again, the wind being personified here almost like a boxer, something that's beating down, hailing down this storm of blows, pummeling your house too. So the sound of the wind moving through the trees helps you to forget that it pummels your house too. So pummels, having that sense of violence and aggression. So we have the storm here being personified as this kind of enemy combatant, someone that you are fighting, or someone you're trying to defend yourself against. You're not fighting against, you're trying to protect yourself against. So the storm is this violent attacking force. And then we have this full stop, and then we are reminded, but there are no trees, no natural shelter. And again, that repetition of that word no, if you look back earlier on in the poem, we have no and we have nor here as well. This constant repetition of this negative word reminds us of all of the things that the island lacks. So everything that the island lacks. And what it really lacks is anything that is naturally beautiful. There are no trees, no natural shelter. There are no stacks or stooks that can be lost. So there's no crops, no beautiful trees. This island is a barren landscape. It's bleak. It's not pleasant. It's not somewhere that you would want to be. Okay. You might think, and there again is that conversational phrase, almost as though Heaney's persona in this dramatic monologue is talking to someone that's never visited this place. You might think, you know what I mean, as you see. So it's as though he's introducing this island to us. You might think that the sea is company. And there again is that personification. No trees which might prove company. You might think that the sea is company. So there's this suggestion running through this poem that we have these ideas about nature, like it's a solace, like it can be a comfort, like it makes us feel less isolated. Heaney's saying you might think that these things would give you comfort and company, but there are no trees on this island, and the sea is about to be shown to be, again, not something that you would want around you in this poem. So, again, that use of personification. To present nature as a source of solace. Solace is like comfort. A source of solace and comfort lacking on this island. So just to stop for a moment and think about the poem that you've already looked at. You've looked at the extract from the prelude, you've thought about Wordsworth, and in his poem he begins by describing nature in this incredibly beautiful way. The persona, as he's rowing out in his little boat, feels really at one and at peace in the natural world. And it's described in this really beautiful language. And we get the sense that, in that very romantic way, this persona is experiencing a sense of real closeness and unity with the natural world that helps him better to understand himself. Of course, that poem changes as it goes on, but here we don't get any sense of that at all. Here, nature is not presented as beautiful, it's not presented as comforting, it's not presented as something that has a harmonious relationship with man whatsoever. It has this really quite antagonistic relationship towards man. So, you might think that the sea is company, exploding comfortably down on the cliffs. So, exploding comfortably, look at that lovely use of oxymoron. These words contradict one another. You can't have a comfortable explosion. So this creates that impression that perhaps for the sea to be exploding comfortably down on the cliffs, it's exploding at a distance, not in a way that's going to hurt us or harm us or affect us. It creates that impression that we can enjoy these things when they aren't too up close and personal. Exploding comfortably down on the cliffs. So that oxymoron creates the impression that a distant explosion down on the cliffs could be comfortable, could be comforting, could be pleasant, could provide us with some sense of company. And then again, he contradicts that idea. But no trees, no shelter. No, you're wrong. The sea isn't company when it explodes comfortably down on the cliffs. When it begins, it being the storm, the flung spray hits the very windows, spits like a tame cat turned savage. So the flung spray, this water that's conjured up from the sea, splashing up against the cliffs, it hits the very windows. So the sea here, which a moment ago was described as being a potential source of company, the sea is now also presented as this enemy. The flung spray hits the very windows, so it's another enemy force. And look at this internal rhyme here, rhyme in the middle of the line. Flung spray hits the very windows, spits like a tame cat turned savage. So we have this internal rhyme suggesting the violence and the aggression, hits and spits. And then we have this gorgeous simile. Hits the very windows, spits like a tame cat turned savage. So we get the impression that the sea, when there is no storm, is like a tame cat, something beautiful, something soothing, something almost like a pet, something that we don't feel threatened by, we don't feel worried about. But when the storm comes, it goes from being tame to being savage. It suddenly is something much more threatening, much more troubling, much more dangerous. Let me write about this down here where I have a bit more space. So, the simile creates the impression that the storm changes the temperament of the sea. From calm and tame to savage. So it becomes threatening, dangerous, and aggressive. Okay, so we're nearly done. Spits like a tame cat turned savage. And we have, again, that caesura there representing the sort of conclusion of that idea, the end of that thought. And now Heaney shifts his focus back again to this community, to the people on the island. We just sit tight. So they're not trying to fight back, they're not trying to sort of protect themselves against this onslaught, this storm anymore. We just sit tight. All they can do is wait for the storm to pass. So they are vulnerable and defensive. While wind dives and strafes invisibly, Now, Heaney does this wonderful thing in the last few lines of this poem, which is to develop an extended metaphor. And in this metaphor, he compares the storm almost to a fighter plane or to this enemy attacking force. So something that dives and strafes invisibly. This is the beginning of this extended metaphor, comparing the wind to a fighter plane, an enemy force attacking the island. And he develops this extended metaphor using a series of verbs which create this sense of violence, which create this sense of attack. So we just sit tight while wind dives and strafes invisibly. Now, to strafe, to attack repeatedly with bombs or machine gun fire from low-flying aircraft. So the wind is attacking them with the force of its power. Dives and strafes invisibly. Invisibly, of course, because unlike a fighter plane, unlike something you could see, an enemy attacking you, the wind is invisible. It simply attacks the house and there's no way that they can really protect themselves against it. And then we have this caesura and this beautiful little four-word sentence. Space is a salvo. So empty space, the empty air, is compared to the firing of several guns simultaneously. And the succinctness, the brevity, the shortness of that little sentence gives it tremendous weight and power in these last few lines. Space is a salvo. So this is that metaphor that began in the previous line. Empty space, empty air is compared to this barrage of machine gun fire. Now, if we think about Owen's poem, Exposure, I think there's a really lovely direct comparison that you can make there. Think of those lines about the merciless iced east winds that knife us, the wind, the air being personified into this violent, aggressive, threatening enemy presence. Here, Heaney does almost exactly the same thing. Space, this empty air, this wind is compared to a barrage of machine gun fire. Space is a salvo. And continuing that sense of that extended metaphor, we are bombarded by the empty air. Strange. It is a huge nothing that we fear. And I love this combination of words, a huge nothing. Huge, giving that sense of vastness, the expanse of nature. And this reminds me again of Wordsworth, but it's a huge nothing that we fear. This empty air. There is nothing there that they can fight back against. They are simply trying to protect themselves against this invisible attacking force. All right, so just to recap on that AO3 kind of big idea then. Heaney uses this poem, where are we, up at the top, to explore the power of the natural world. And that power is developed throughout this poem, but most strongly, I think, within these last few lines, within this extended metaphor. So to explore the power of the natural world and to show the comparative vulnerability of man. So look at the way that he talks about the people. We are bombarded, we are prepared, we are bombarded. It is a huge nothing that we fear. And that word fear is echoed throughout the poem. The idea that this storm is genuinely threatening and genuinely something to be afraid of. All right, so hopefully that's taken you nice and clearly through the different methods that Heaney uses. Hopefully you're feeling a little bit more confident on the ideas of the poem and how you could maybe compare to some of the other poems from the collection, which also deal with the power of nature. All right, thanks very much, guys, and good luck with all of your revision.